Welcome everyone, I'm the Depressed Eeyore, and this is the introduction to another run of Final Fantasy Tactics 1.3. So the 1.3 patch is a balance slash difficulty patch for Final Fantasy Tactics. If you go to insane difficulty, I think .com, it goes into further detail. I'll provide some links, but this intro is going to kind of explain some of this stuff as we go along. But yeah, it's the original. The way it worked was it changed some classes, removed some classes, added new classes, and changed all the classes for the most part, and made them a little bit more viable. Even things like squires and stuff are a little bit more useful now. The other thing was all the story encounters originally leveled up with you. So if you were one of those guys like me who did a lot of leveling up for jobs and job classes and stuff like that in the first part of Chapter 1, you'll quickly find yourself in a situation where you end up fighting story encounters where the guys are equal level to you, have a large amount of abilities, and have gear equivalent to their level, which it doesn't make the game impossible, but it can definitely be a shocker for a lot of new players. But what I played was actually the 1.3 content patch, and what that does is it does all the changes for the classes and monsters and stats and stuff like that. But for story encounters, they, for the most part, will not level up with you. The only exception to this is, of course, random encounters will still level up with you, though the gear will probably stay the same until maybe the final chapters. Also, some story encounters that are just purely fighting monsters will level up with you, so you will still get blindsided by fighting really powerful monsters, especially since monsters in this version are a lot more viable and not just fodder. Anyway, so the reason why I don't even have the game open right now is, and I have this picture here that I've zoomed in on, is I wanted to go ahead and just quickly go over all the classes. This is actually my second attempt to record this, because the first time I recorded it, apparently it didn't actually record my voice. So I'm just going to go ahead and go over some of the basic descriptions. I'm not going to really go too much into this. I'll kind of explain what some of this stuff is. I will include a link that kind of lets you guys look at it on your own, because I don't know how well you guys can actually see any of this, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm going to go quickly over to all the base classes, job classes, and all of the character-specific classes, special classes. And then I will probably go into a little bit more detail about kind of how job abilities work and stuff for those who are not familiar with Final Fantasy Tactics, because well, I have a new computer and I have a new I finally got a new PlayStation emulator, and I've been watching Pro Jared's playthrough of 1.3, and I kind of want to do it again. I got all the way to the end of 1.3, but then I gave up. And all my runs of Final Fantasy Tactics, both the patch version and the non-patch version, I allowed the audience to kind of decide my characters, and I'm hoping to kind of do that this time. I'm going to change things up a little bit to kind of ensure that things, to promote getting as much feedback as possible from you guys and as much participation as possible. Of course, if I don't get anything, I'll probably end up doing a lot of random stuff, but I'll go into that later. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and explain as best as I can some of the job classes and go from there. So, as far as layout for the picture, you can see over here kind of shows the requirements of the class, what they look like for male and female, as well as some additional information that the creators of the patch will tell you about the class. They'll be explaining the class in reference to the original the original non-patch version, just to kind of show what the contrast is. The other parts, of course, are all these stats up here. HPC, these things kind of decide your HP growth and things like that. This decides MP growth. Honestly, I wouldn't really worry too much about these numbers. It's pretty safe to assume that if you play some sort of caster class, you'll get more MP than HP and things like that. Over here is speed, which doesn't change that much, I don't believe. Physical attack growth, magic attack growth, and then really the only thing that probably matters most and is easiest to kind of keep track of. Like I said, all this stuff is pretty safe to just make assumptions. Like if you're playing a thief and a ninja, you could probably assume that your speed's going to probably be a little bit better than other classes. So forth. But over here you have your movement, which is you have movement, jump, and this is your class evasion percentage. So movement is just how far you can move. Jump influences how high you can jump as well as how far you can drop. I believe you can drop an additional distance or two. I don't remember exactly how much drop distance you have, but for jump up distance, that's what this number represents. So that's how much vertical elevation you can go on during movement. Anyway, this evasion here is your base evasion for your class. For the most part, I think it's only against front attacks, but I'm not entirely certain. So this ranges anywhere from 5% to 33%, which is, I believe, the highest. Obviously, dexterous characters like thieves and ninjas and dancers will tend to have like 30 evasion, while caster classes tend to have about 5. So this evasion will be reducing any base hit chance attack has. I believe it's physical base hit chance, and that will determine hit chance and whether or not you evade or not. Over here, you got the list of all of their weapons and stuff. I will probably explain those really quickly as I go through each class. And then over here, you have innate abilities. Some classes will automatically have certain abilities active. For example, the chemist automatically has move, find item, maintenance, and throw item, which means you do not have to equip those abilities if you have this class active. Yeah, and then of course you got over here. I'll list whatever their primary skill is and what abilities they have under it. Over here you have your reaction abilities, which I'll go a little bit more into once I pull up the game. Over here you got support abilities, and then here is movement abilities. So R is reaction, S is support, M is movement. Standard stuff. JP represents how many job points it takes to unlock certain abilities. I wouldn't really worry about that. I will unlock abilities as we go along, no matter what. And as for the skills themselves, they kind of explain things like the range they have, whether or not they're based off weapon, whether it's just a value, whether it's melee, whether it's target self, things like that. It also determine things like vertical movement. CT represents charge time, MP represents MP cost, element represents what element damage it does, or element type it is. EV, EV represents what evasion type it is. So P represents physical evasion, and if it's a spell or something like that, it'll probably be M, which is magical evasion. Then it'll list whether or not it can be negated with silence, or it can be reflected with like a wall spell. And then, of course, it has some details of what the actual ability does, which, like the heal ability will do, remove status effects, and so forth. Anyway, over here you have C, CM, and CF. All this represents is whether or not an ability can trigger counter magic, or counter flood. Counter is both counter throw and counter, which is just physical counterattacks. So if you hit somebody and you're next to them, you'll get counterattacked if they have the counter ability. And if it's just a physical attack and you hit them with it and they have counter throw, they'll counter with counter throw. Counter magic just represents whether or not they will cast that same ability back at you if they happen to have counter magic. And counter flood is whether or not it will trigger the counter flood ability, which is a geomancer ability. So essentially, instead of countering with a physical attack, they'll do one of their elemental abilities. Anyway, so that's about the gist of it. I'm going to go ahead and just read off the description of the class. Also, as I go along, I'll probably try to put up some additional information of class requirements. Some of them may be just corrections because some of these are wrong, but also it'll go into a little bit more detail. Like, for example, to be a monk, you need to be a level 3 knight, but to become a knight, you would need to be a level 3 squire. So once we start talking about monk, I'll bring up that you need to be both a level 3 squire and a level 3 knight. Just to kind of it'll kind of give you guys who are not familiar with the game just the kind of the progression to get to whatever your target class is. And that'll kind of help you decide what abilities I have access to just from progressing to the class you want. Of course, if you want me to get abilities from other classes outside of it, I mean, we'll go into more detail in a bit. Anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and start from the bottom, start from the top, go to the bottom. If this video ends up being really long, I'll just make it a separate video, and I'll talk more about the voting system and the details of that on another video. If not, it'll be at the end of this video. Anyway, so first things first, we're going to talk about the squire. So you have two base classes. You have the squire and the chemist. One's kind of physical, one's more support. The Squire has gained a notable boost compared to its predecessors in the original. While overshadowed quickly, the Squire's basic skill is very well rounded, able to bring back KO'd allies, inflict critical hits, knock back the enemy, and inflict accurate weapon attacks. They have a good ranged and melee equipment spread and can increase their offense power if left alone for too long. So, yeah, Squires were always kind of just like, you just wanted to get. The only reason you became a Squire is so you can unlock, like, Knight, so you can actually be something that's more useful. Now they're a little bit better. They have a really good equipment spread, which I'll go into in a second. And they're kind of like a jack of all trades, but like a minor jack of all trades, I guess you should say. They have some utility, but it's not super reliable. And some of their stuff is kind of weak, but at least they have options, I guess you can say. So, as you might know, for those who are familiar with the game, they'll probably know some skills that are probably originally from other classes. For example, Weapon Guard used to be a Knight ability, now it's a Squire ability. Just go off whatever's on these charts. Anyway, as for the equipment, they can equip maces, swords, bow guns. I don't know why I listed swords again. I don't know if that means that they can actually use knight swords. I don't think that's true. And I don't know if this means they can actually use regular bows. I don't know if they accidentally duplicated the image. But they do get access to dagger, light helmets, light armor, and accessories. Pretty standard stuff. They have 4 movement, 3 jump, 10 evasion. Chemist. Your other base class. So, item is among the most useful and versatile skill sets in the game, having instant revival, status curing, and healing. Elixir is out and move to special enemies only. Chemist can also equip guns, which have several unique uses. They work great with meat, bone, slash, and equipment breaks. A team with a chemist supporting is incredibly difficult to deal with. So these guys are the class that learn how to use items. They have a bunch of innate abilities. They can move and find items. So if they land on a spot that has a hidden item, they'll pick it up. They can throw items, which means they can actually throw potions at people, and it will heal them from a distance. Maintenance means they can't get their equipment stolen or broken. And as for equipment, they get light helmets, light armor, accessories, daggers, and now they have access to guns. So in the later game, they can actually use their guns to do a little bit extra range damage or to trigger various physical attacks using guns, such as break weapons. Anyway, let's go ahead and keep going. Oh, also stat-wise, 3 movement, 3 jump, 15 evasion. So actually they are a little bit more evasive than Squires. Anyway, if you become a level 3 Squire, you can become a Knight. Knights are now extremely durable and extremely hard-hitting units. While not very mobile, their stat-breaking techniques are now ranged, so they can begin crippling the enemy before they close the distance. All item break skills are now very accurate, making the Knight an extremely powerful physical disabler. And make sure I'm still recording. I am. Okay, so the Knight class was generally the only reason you became a Knight in the original game was so you could not be a Squire anymore. Their big thing was, of course, they had to get access to armor, which gets them more HP and makes them just able to take hits and things like that. Gear-wise, they can use swords, knight swords, shields, which improve evasion, helmets, heavy armor, and they can actually equip robes. So if they want to be kind of like a secondary caster type thing, that is an option, and they get access to accessories. They have 3 movement, 3 jump, and 10 evasion. And as mentioned before, they have a bunch of abilities that can break equipment, which can severely limit monsters or enemies. They can, removing armor and stuff will reduce their max HP, removing their shield will reduce their evasion, and removing their weapon will potentially ruin their ways to actually hurt you. In the case of the ruin abilities, they are ranged now, which is great. They're reasonably accurate, and they do cost MP, which is a bit weird because they don't actually list that here. But yeah, they do cost MP now. They can slow targets from a distance, and they can do things like reduce actual physical and magical attack power, which is pretty useful. They can also drain MP, so they got some versatility now and actual uses for their MP. Anyway, let's go ahead and keep going. Marksman. So you can get access to this at level 3 Squire. They have 3 movement, 4 jump, and 10 evasion. Marksmen replace archers with a brand new precision skill set. Precision allows marksmen and other jobs to add special effects to their weapon attacks. All precision skills will take the range of the weapon they are used with, and they can even be combined with 2 weapons to fire twice. So yeah, even though these are archer marksman abilities, you can actually use them with melee attacks. So that is an option. So if you want to, you can have Time Strike, which is essentially what Charge was in the original game. You can actually do that with a melee strike and so forth. So they're definitely a little bit more flexible if you want to use these as a secondary ability for another class. Anyway, they do get access to bows, which are two-handed and are very flexible with their range and generally pretty damaging. Bow guns, on the other hand, are one-handed. They're not very flexible range-wise, but they do have the potential to do a double strike, which is when they hit, they can do an additional free hit. Now, the benefit, of course, of the bow gun is that since it's one-handed, and marksmen can use shields, they can have a shield which can improve their defenses a little bit at the cost of flexibility, range flexibility. They do get access to light helmets, light armor, and accessories. Anyway, for the most part, most of the stuff kind of explains what their actual abilities is, so I'm not going to go too far into that because there's still a lot to go through. Anyway, the monk class. So we're going further down another branch. You need to be a level 3 knight. Monks have innate martial arts, boosting the effectiveness of punch arts by half. Monks have range skills, area effect skills, healing, and revival, and all of them are instant. Due to the unique fist formula, its damage rises exponentially as physical attack increases, making monks one of the most devastating classes at higher levels. So they have innate martial arts, which allows them to do additional physical damage when they're attacking with their fist, and when using punch arts, which are these abilities here. They have a kind of a wide range of abilities, kind of similar to a squire, but they're a lot more potent and reliable. Of course, punch arts tend to work better with characters that actually have martial arts equipped, but you can use it even without martial arts, but it's at less effectiveness. Equipment-wise, they can only equip light armor for the chest and accessories. They can't equip anything else without any additional support abilities. Alright. The priest. You have to be a level 3 chemist for this. Priests can play offense and defense using the holy elements. They can restore HP, reduce damage taken, cure statuses, and bring back the dead. With above average speed and the ability to equip flails, priests can also hold their own in close quarters, but still need adequate protection. So yeah, they actually get access to, they have staves, light helmets, light armor, robes, and accessories, but they now also have access to maces. So you can actually use them as sort of clerics, like from Dungeons & Dragons. And with the correct support abilities, you can practically make a cleric if you really want to. A lot of their spells have been are a little bit more unique than they were in the previous game, or the previous version. They no longer have just Cure 1 to Cure 4 and all that nonsense. Now they have kind of a wide range of uniquely named abilities. They have 3 attack spells now instead of just 1. They still have Holy, of course, but they now have Spirit Surge, which is a weaker Holy spell that can be cast at a lower level, I guess you can say. But they also get a Holy Strike ability, which is based off weapon. So you can use Holy Strike in conjunction with, any sort of weapon, guns, bows, maces, and it's based off your physical attack power and stuff like that. So it is pretty useful. It also can cause confusion, so yeah. If you want to be like some holy melee guy, you could probably mix and match like priest and knight or priest and whatever and do some stuff with that. Alright. Oh, also, stat-wise, I didn't really go into, sorry, I didn't mention the move and jump and evasions. Monk has 3 movement, 4 jump, and 20 evasion. Priests have 3, 3, and 5. Nothing big deal. And wizards have 3, 3, and 5. Let's talk about wizards. You have to be a level 3 chemist. The wizard controls a variety of elemental spells used to harm and inflict weaknesses on the enemy. They carry some of the strongest single-target magic and dark holy, as well as the abilities to melt down, punishing enemies with their own negative energy. They can disable enemies using the frog spell or put stop targets to rest prematurely using shatter. So they got some unique. The wizard the black mage used to be really kind of generic. It was like fire 1 to fire 3 and ice 1 to ice 3 and all that nonsense. Now they have very specifically named spells that have very specific uses, like explosion single target fire that can do oil. Chain lightning is a straight line that does electric, things like that. Some of the things, of course, they can self-destruct, which is kind of neat. And they do get 1 status effect spell, but their main focus is, of course, elemental damage. Oh, and equipment-wise, they can equip kind of this. They can equip robes, light armor, light helmet, or magic rods or magic wands. I guess I'll call them for right now. Time Mage. So the Time Mage is 3, 3, and 5 as well. You have to be a level 3 wizard to become this class. The Time Mage is a useful as ever, with an extremely versatile, powerful skill set, able to manipulate the game's speed and turn system, and capable of inflicting game-breaking statuses and buffs. They are faster than most casters, and their spells resolve fairly quickly, making for great support units. I'm not going to go into the detail about all their abilities, but they get access to staffs, light armors, and robes. And their stuff, it just involves buffs and debuffs that influence turn order, as well as a few debuffs that can just stop people in their tracks. They do get a few attack spells, but they're pretty high level, and they are pretty devastating, but they are expensive, to say the least. But yeah, most of their stuff involves turn manipulation and a few debuffs. Anyway, the Summoner class, you have to be a level 3 Time Mage. 1.3 Summoners have lost the ability to use Golem, an AI breaking skill in the original Final Fantasy Tactics. However, all their spells now resolve faster. And Fairy is able to resurrect many fallen units at once. Lich now absorbs HP from targets. And Carbuncle adds Defend on top of Reflect. Their speed has been increased, and they are able to equip a greater range of magical weapons. So as you can see, they get access to pretty much all the magical weapons. There's the bow staff, spellbook, staff, and of course magic rod. They also get access to robes and light armors, and essentially these guys are just upgraded casters. They have their spells do not have any friendly fire, which is very useful. Makes them a little bit more flexible, and all their spells tend to have really wide range AoEs. And they range from support, healing spells, and devastating offensive elemental attacks. Oh, and 3, 3, and 5, because they're casters. Alright, Thieves. If you go down the marksman route, Thieves are now extremely dexterous, able to ignore their target's evasion with their physical skills and attacks. They have accurate item steal techniques with enhanced vertical ranges, and can guild toss the enemy to finish it off from range. They have great support skills, as well as the ability to inflict charm on the opposite sex, one of the deadliest status effects. So the main thing about Thieves is they get the innate ability of Concentrate, which is this is a marksman ability, and it makes it so all of your attacks have 100% accuracy. What it actually does is it means you ignore all evasion that your opponent has when using physical attacks. So in the case of regular attacks, you have 100% hit chance. In the case of things like stealing, it just means you have a higher chance of success, and don't have to worry about their evasion. Speaking of stealing, they specialize in taking items, which can be very useful because you can get unique items from very unique characters during certain battles. They do get a ranged attack that's kind of minor, nothing too special, and then Steel Heart allows them to inflict the charm status effect to the opposite sex. Alright, as for equipment, they get light armor, daggers, and ninja knives, or ninja swords. Okay, Mediators. If you become a level 3 Oracle, which we haven't even talked about oracles yet. Mediators have lost the ability to alter Brave or Faith in 1.3, but have received increased accuracy on most of their skills. Additionally, Threaten, Praise, Preach, and Solution cannot be blocked by Finger Guard and work on monsters, even without monster skill equipped. Invitation can be used to force enemy units to join your party, but the hit percentage is very low, so try disabling them first. So they have the innate Monster Talk ability, which just means they can use their abilities on monsters. Essentially, these guys focus on buffs and debuffs, but their abilities don't cost any MP, and they're instant cast, which is a little bit unique. So they're kind of like a physical-based character. They're a little bit more physical than most of the support classes, which is kind of useful. They get access to daggers, guns, spellbooks, light armors, robes, and accessories. And that's about it. This is also the only class that gets the ability to force enemies to join your party. So if you want to go and recruit monsters and things like that, you can use a mediator for that. Also stat-wise, 3, 3, and 5, because they're still essentially a caster class, even though they don't use any MP. Oracles. Oracle's yin-yang magic is now much faster and accurate than before, making oracles the true masters of status effects. A few castings of Union magic can shut down groups of enemy units very quickly, leaving them open and even deadlier spells later on. So these guys actually have evasion, or at least I think they do. 3/3/24, which is a really odd number. It makes me feel like it's a typo. Um, they get all the spell weapons, so staves, rods, books, and bow staffs. And they get access to light armor, but they don't get access to robes. Spell-wise, they get all the debuff spells for the most part. And debuff spells are a little bit more accurate, and they're definitely a lot more devastating now because they're so reliable. Monsters definitely take advantage of them in random encounters. So we'll definitely get to see some of how that works. They of course have other abilities, but like I said, you guys can just read up on them. I'll include a link for more details, and I'll kind of explain how you can mix and match this stuff, and either in the end of this video or in a later video. Anyway, Geomancers. Oh, did I mention? Oh, level 3 priest, by the way, for the Oracle. Anyway, Geomancers. They have 4 movement, 3 jump, and 10 evasion. You have to be level 4 monk to unlock this class. Geomancers now have increased damage at the cost of reduced range. Their ability to deal instant, unavoidable damage with a chance of status makes them a solid addition to any team. Their unique equipment combination makes them powerful carriers of almost any skill set. Alright, so they have an innate abilities. They have any ground and move on lava, which means they can actually walk on lava tiles, and they're not really hindered by moving over any terrain. They get access to axes, swords, shields, and light armors, so it's kind of a mix of decent physical damage, but not much tanking ability. And their special ability is Elemental, which is an ability that you can activate based off what tile you're on. So if you're on a grass tile, you can do Hell Ivy. If you are in water, you can do Water Ball, and so forth. That's why all these abilities have the same cost, and they all have essentially the same damage for the most part, except for Lava Ball, of course. Alright. But the main thing about Elemental is its range has been reduced compared to the original game, but its damage is a little bit better, and it's influenced by your physical attack as well as your magic attack, it looks like. Kind of hard to read. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah, it's influenced both by your physical and magic attack. And all of them have a 1 in 5 chance of causing a status effect, depending on their type of elemental ability. Anyway, so yeah, they do really reliable damage, and their ability doesn't require any charge time, and it doesn't require any MP. So, and it's 100% accurate. Anyway, Lancers. Now, this is incorrect. It says 3 Monk, 3 Thief. That is incorrect. It's actually level 4 Thief. I know this because I've checked it. Alright, Lancers have had their maximum jump range reduced, but have gained a significant speed and power increase. Ranged and tanked hybrid, Lancers can avoid many timed abilities while they are in the air, directing a spear to the opponent's head. So yeah, this class, they have 3 move, 4 jump, and 15 evasion. They can equip shields and heavy armor, and they can use spears. Spears will do extra damage when you do jump. The way jump works is you jump straight out. You jump out of the screen, essentially, and you cannot be targeted while you're in the air. And then after a certain amount of time, you will land on the location you click on. The range, of course, the range and vertical range is based off how far you get down this tree here. And just a note, sorry. So for spears, you don't actually get access to spears in Chapter 1. So if you are going to use Lancers, just be aware that in the early game, they can only use their fist, or they can use whatever weapon you decide to get a support ability for. But yeah, these guys are just they're just upgraded guys that can use jump abilities. Oh, something to know about the charge time for jump, of course, is if the target moves out of the way before you land, that it will miss. But I mean, there's no bad part about that. But yeah, knights that specialize in jumping and using spears. There you go. Sorry if that was a little wordy. Anyway, Samurai. Samurai have 3, 3, and 20 for their stats. They require level 5 Monk, level 3 Knight, level 3 Lancer. A fighter and magician hybrid job. Samurais are able to equip armor, grasp weapons with both hands to double their weapon power, and use area effect spells. Magic drawn for spare katanas. Draw out no longer discriminates between enemy or ally, so take care extra care must be taken where you position your samurai. Very powerful in the right hands and able to use in-game skills such as Mazamune and Chirijiradin. Sorry if I butchered that. Anyway, they can equip katanas, heavy armor, heavy helmet, heavy armor, and robes. They have 2 hands innate, which means they can wield their weapons two-handed to do twice as much damage. And all their abilities revolve around using katanas, such as Asura, and there's Mazamune down there. And there's a chance every time you use that ability that it will break said weapon. So just make sure you have spare weapons. And it's no longer, it does have friendly fire now, so it's definitely a little bit more risky to use because it's point blank. But yeah, it's just a bunch of magical abilities that and support abilities that are kind of unique. So yeah, samurais are kind of like your spell swords for the most part. And yeah, pretty much it. That is pretty much it. Something to note, of course, in early chapters, you do not have access to katanas yet, so you'll have to make do with swords or just use your fist or something. Anyway, ninjas. Level 5 Thief, level 4 Marksman, level 3 Geomancer. The second fastest job with amazing melee and ranged offensive capabilities. Throw delivers instant physical and magical damage that only increases with the ninja's move stat. Their biggest weakness is extremely low HP, which may or may not be remedied with their evasion capabilities. So they have the innate ability 2 swords, which means they can dual wield, so they attack with both weapons. They have 4 movement, 4 jump, and 30 evasion. They have daggers, ninja swords, flails or maces, and light armors, as well as accessories as for their equipment. For their throw ability, it just decides what items you can throw or what weapons you can throw. And the amount of damage they do is based off your speed and the weapon damage, or the weapon power. The range of your throw is based off your movement stat. So without any adjustments, it's 4 range, but if you get things like +2 movement, it'll go up to 6. Which is can give you some really long range attacks. Anyway, Sage. This is pretty much the top tier of the, well, not top tier, but the end of the caster sides of the job classes. They have 3-3-5 because they're casters. 5 priest, 5 wizard, 4 time mage, and 4 oracle. So yeah, it takes quite a bit to become a sage. A much needed rebalance of the old calculator job. Sages have access to forbidden boss-only magic that can affect the outcome of a battle in a single cast. They can remove buffs, empty the CT of targets. CT is charge time, so it affects turn order. And cast a variety of statuses over a wide area. They have access to one of the strongest area effect spells in the game with Flare 2. So yeah, a lot of these abilities are abilities that if you've played the original game, these were abilities that bosses had, and now this class can actually use some of them. They also get some really fancy support abilities that are otherwise more difficult to get. Anyway, they get access to all the caster weapons, so books, staves, rods, and bow staffs. They also get access to swords, light armor, and robes and accessories. Okay, almost done here. So we got the Bard. There are 2 gender-specific classes. There's Bard and Dancer. Bard is male only. Dancer is female only. Bard is 4, 3, and 30, and they require level 4 Mediator, level 4 Summoner. Bards are now fast defensive support units. Their HP and MP healing songs add up very quickly, and a bard that is left undisturbed will push the buffs and stat values of his party through the roof in no time. Like the Dancer has access to amazing support skills. So you can see here, all these abilities are just songs, and the way they work is he'll sing, and as the charge time is met, it will trigger these effects, and it will affect all allies. Now, if you do take any other action besides performing, that will cancel your effect. All right. They also have access to the highest movement increases. So if you want to get the most movement or jump, besides, of course, ignore height, if you want to get the most movement, you can get movement +3, which will increase your movement to like 7, which is ridiculous. Anyway, for the Dancer, it's 330, just like the Bard. And they require a level 4 Lancer, level 4 Geomancer. Dancers are now extremely dangerous offensive support units. Leaving a dancer alone will mean that your party's attributes and stats might hit the floor very, very quickly. They are fast and have high evasion and can absorb more damage than regular support jobs thanks to MP Switch, high priority target. So they have access to daggers, sashes, which are just a dancer-specific weapon, and then light helmets and light armor and accessories. All their stuff is kind of the opposite of the Bard. Instead of targeting your allies, it targets enemies and does damage and debuffs and things like that. Other than that, all the other support abilities are pretty much the same, except for, of course, attack save versus magic attack save. And then the final one is Mime. Now, Mime in the original game was kind of ridiculous because it was just impossible. Well, not impossible, but by the time you have the requirements for Mime in the original game, you pretty much have won the game because you would have mastered all the classes. It's now a lot less. You need to be level 2 in every job except for Ninja, Samurai, Sage, Dancer, and Bard. That's still a higher requirement, but it's not. In the original, it was level 8 in all classes. So you can definitely get Mime a lot sooner now. Now, the way Mime works is they're very unique. They have 7 movement, 7 jump, and 33 evasion, which is ridiculously high. They can't equip any gear. They have a bunch of innate abilities. They have Monster Skill, Concentrate, which means they ignore evasion when they attack. They have Counter, which means they attack. They'll counter with their own physical attack if they get melee hit. Martial Arts, which means they do extra damage with their fist, which is the only thing they can use. And then they're immune to status, which is very, very unique because they're the only class that's immune to status effects, which is really good. But the way Mimes work is instead of taking standard actions, I don't know if they can. I think they can regular attack, but I'm not entirely certain. I don't remember. But the way they work is you position them and face them in certain directions, and whenever any of your other characters take action, do actions, the mime will mimic it. So, if, for example, you move a mime to flank a monster, and your knight's flanking the other end, your knight can do a regular attack on that monster and do some damage, and then the mime will immediately take his own action, punching in front of him and attacking that same target. So that's some tricks you can do with it. I did show up Mime in my other playthrough once, and that's because I was desperate to deal with one really ridiculously hard boss. And what I ended up doing was I had some summoners and then a few mimes, and then I kind of positioned them. I pretty much just faced them in the right direction and just immediately unloaded with all my most powerful offensive summons. And the mimes immediately mimicked them, and it definitely stacks very quickly. So if you have multiple mimes, they will all trigger. So it's pretty amazing. So yeah, there are definitely some tricks you can do with mimes. Anyway, that is pretty much it for these standard classes. I'm going to go ahead and quickly go over the special classes. I'm not going to really go into how Ramza works. The way Ramza works is he's just kind of like an improved squire. He'll eventually learn some unique abilities at the end game, but I don't really care about those, and they're kind of hard to get. But the thing to note, though, is he gets a lot more flexible as far as what sort of gear he can use. So by the end, he can actually use pretty much all the physical attacks and shields and armors that you can ever really use for him. So if you want to use Ramza as a squire, by all means you can. Just, of course, you probably want to pick a good secondary class ability, though. I'm not going to go over those two because they're all guest classes. But over here we got Mustadia. Mustadia's engineer job can now use crossbows and bows as well as guns. He specializes in speed with a good speed growth and multiplier, as well as respectable physical attack value. Engineers or specialists are handling equipment and are immune to steal and break techniques. Gained a new skill called Moss Fungus Bomb. So they have innate maintenance, which means they can't get their stuff stolen or broken. They can petrify undead with really good accuracy, which is pretty useful. They do have the ability to cause the Don't Move debuff, which is based off weapon range. And their newest ability is the Moss Fungus Bomb, which lets them do poison and slow as an AoE, which is pretty useful. So they did a little bit with Mustadia to make him a little bit more useful as an engineer. But yeah, the way the special classes work is they generally replace Squire with whatever their class is, so in this case, Engineer. And if you want me to use these classes, they become unlocked during certain chapters, but I'll go more into that later. I'm not going to talk about monster classes because honestly they're kind of not that interesting because they're just monsters and they don't change. But I really wanted to go over stuff like Agrius here. Agrius is a Holy Knight, and one second. There we go. Needed some water. Anyway, so the way Agrias works is she's a Holy Knight job. Agrias' Holy Knight job has better PA growth, or physical attack growth, and multiplier, and is now the only special job with access to the full spectrum of Holy Sword skills. Sword skills themselves now have MP costs, are available, and not as powerful as before. So yeah, this is what I wanted to definitely point out. In the original game, Holy Knight classes and their equivalents were kind of ridiculously overpowered. Originally, these abilities had no cost, always hit, and did quite a bit of damage. And there were also Knight Swords, which were ridiculously strong as well. Now, these attacks can miss, so evasion is definitely a key thing to keep track of, because especially most of these are physical attacks, which means things like shields and weapon guards and things like that will definitely protect you from these sorts of attacks, which is good. They also have MP costs, which means if you're fighting against certain bosses that happen to be using Holy Sword, you can quickly drain them of their MP to try to take them out that way. Because usually the only way you can even stop some of these guys from using these abilities was by breaking their weapon or stealing it, if you're lucky, which was pretty hard in the base game. Knight Swords have been debuffed a bit. They're still really powerful, and they do give you various status effects. They give you buffs, but those buffs are no longer permanent. So, like things like Excalibur, which used to give you permanent haste, will now give you haste at the beginning of the battle, but it wears off. So it's a bit more toned down. So I wanted to go ahead and point this out. So if you do want me to play certain characters, like want me to use characters like Agrias, it will not break the game. The game is more than balanced enough to handle these characters now. So by all means, if you want me to use Agrias and show off how balanced these classes are now, I will happily do so. Of course, if you want me to do any additional job changing with these characters, I can do that as well. Anyway, we also get access to the Onion Knight now, which we get access it's far later in the game, unfortunately, but we do eventually get one. Their main thing is they get maintenance, concentrate, 2 hands, and 2 swords, which is really good because they're just innate abilities. But they also get access to every equipment in the game. They can equip anything. There's nothing they can't equip, and that's their only ability. So I believe you can still give. I think the primary ability is Mastery, but you can still give them a secondary ability. But I don't remember exactly because I haven't really messed too much with them. Over here we got Rift Traveler Marsh, who's unique to the patch version. Marsh the Wanderer makes a special appearance during Chapter 3. His skills represent the wonders he has seen during his adventures in and out of Ivalice. He kind of has a mixture of magic abilities and some wacky random stuff. Equipment-wise, he can equip heavy armor, light helmet, shield, sword, and book. Kind of weird. Also, I didn't really go over the equipment for Agrias. It's pretty standard. It's heavy armor, shield, knight sword, regular sword, and robes. And for Mustadio, he can equip bows, bow guns, guns, and light armors and accessories. There you go. Okay, we got Rafa. Alright, Heaven Knights. Rafa's truth skill no longer have a charge time, making them very useful for chance spikes of damage that may instantly kill even the strongest foes. Additionally, she can now equip books and rods, and her base magic attack is higher. So yeah, she can equip all the magic weapons, light armors, and she can equip robes. Now the thing about truth is originally it had a cast time and it was a random target. So this thing has a AoE of 1, which means it's a cross shape AoE, and any valid location in that cross shaped AoE could be where these 1 to 6 hits could appear. And the problem with that is if there's only 1 target in that location, and there's 5, you had the potential of hitting 5 squares, that means each of these 1 to 6 hits only has a 20% chance of hitting their target. Now, there's some ways you can, if you're lucky, you can get it narrowed down a little bit, but yeah, unless you're really lucky, there's a pretty good chance that your truth skill will not hit anything. So they removed the charge time, which helps, but now you just get to see how not useful that the ability is without waiting now. But if you want me to use Heaven Knights, by all means, let me know, and I'll try my best. Of course, we don't get access to them till Chapter 3. Alright, Malik, the Hell Knight. Malik is now faster and is very proficient with physical attacks due to innate two swords. He acts like a ninja that can cast elemental spells. He can now equip flails, knives, and ninja swords. Although, much like his sister, he is very, very fragile. Although weaker than truth magic, his untruth skills can hit up to 10 times. And the lower the target's faith, the stronger untruth becomes. And so he has access to daggers, ninja swords, flails, light armors, robes, and accessories, and his stuff is pretty much the same, except it's weaker, but it has 1 to 10 hits. And it has the same issues as Truth, which is random target. Death Knights, this is very much Gathgarion, but you now get your own. He gets the Death Knight's a new addition to the PlayStation version of the game with 1.3. One of them asks to join your party during storyline events. A very balanced character with some powerful unholy sword attacks. This independent heretic warrior is the exact opposite of a holy knight. So yeah, they get some ability to drain HP, MP, and stuff like that. Much like all sword skills, these attacks can be evaded, and they do cost MP. He does get access to the standard gear set. He has access to heavy armor, shields, knight swords, and swords. Also, I haven't been really going over the move, jump, and class evasion, but these are unique characters, so it doesn't really matter that much. Orlandu. So Orlandu was kind of like the most overpowered thing in Final Fantasy Tactics. He had Excalibur for one thing, which gave him permanent haste in the original game. And he had access to all the sword skills, so he just did a lot of damage. But he has been toned down. Orlando has received some major nerfs to his stats and equipment options. He can no longer master all types of sword skills, but can learn some staple skills from different kinds. He can no longer equip katanas or ninja swords, and can no longer wear hats or cloths. So he still has access to robes, heavy armor, shields, knight swords, and swords. But yeah, he's become kind of like a jack of all trades as far as sword skills are concerned. And that's about it. So he's still probably decent, but he still has the same restrictions as anyone else that has sword skills now, which is MP cost and the fact that it can be evaded. Alright, Meliadol. Divine Knight. Meliadol can now use Crush Punch to damage things without equipment. She has very high physical attack growth, and her skills have great vertical targeting. It says great vertical targeting, but they're listed as no vertical, but whatever. She's perfect for disarming stronger late-game generics and breaking their powerful gear from a distance. So originally, Meliadol was kind of very limited. Her abilities used to be just, you did a lot of damage and then broke whatever item you were targeting. But if you're up against a monster that didn't have any breakable gear, or were monsters and didn't have any gear, her abilities were they couldn't be used. But now she has Crush Punch, so she does have some sort of physical attack if she needs it. She gets access to heavy armors, robes, shields, swords, knight swords, and bow guns of all things. Beowulf, Temple Knight. Beowulf is faster and more durable than before. The range and accuracy of all of his skills have been reduced. However, his ability to inflict lethal statuses and damage it instantly on individual enemies makes him very useful in the end game. So yeah, he has he had a lot of status effects that are really, really accurate in the original game, but that's been nerfed a little bit. But yeah, he's still kind of like he's a magic knight that specializes in debuffs. It still has all the evasion restrictions and MP costs. I think in the original game it didn't even cost MP, but I don't remember. Swords, knight swords, shields, heavy armors, robes, accessories, standard stuff. Holy Dragon's just a monster. I'm not going to go into that. And then Reese the Dragoner. In her human form, Reese retains some of her breath of powers, but loses some of the toughness she had as a holy dragon. She gains abilities that boost the performance of allied dragons and gains Holy Breath, a very powerful magic attack that works like a stronger version of Ratha's Truth skill. Holy Bracelet, of course, has that same issue of, hitting random targets. She can only equip accessories by out the gate, but you can, of course, try to get her to learn how to equip some stuff. But she has Monster Talk, 2 Swords, Monster Skill, and Train as innate abilities. Worker 8's pretty much a monster, so I'm not going to really go into him. Cloud is a soldier. Cloud is much more powerful than before. His limited attacks are all resolve faster and follow whatever target they are cast on, hitting their mark much more often. They can be blocked with magic evasion. Meteor Rain now targets all enemies on the map. So the biggest issue with Cloud's limit abilities were the fact they had ridiculously long charge times. But he does have access to Meteor Rain, which targets everything. It doesn't have range at all, which is impressive. He gets access to light armors, swords, and night swords, and that's about it. And then we do get a new monster class character later on, which is this demon guy, but I'm not going to go into that because he's a monster. Alright, so that is all of them. And how are we on time? Yeah, 50 minutes, that's quite a bit. So yeah, I will go ahead and call this a video. So this video is just for kind of informing you guys. I'll include links to where I got this information, so you guys can look it up yourself if you want to. And so you guys have all the information you need to kind of decide what you want me to do for the upcoming playthrough. I'll go more into details in the next video. So I'm the Depressed Dior. See you guys in a bit.